collectively, they are the entity known as SASH. I see. No, Ash Carter and Sam Kashner. It's all designed to trip me up, I think. Okay, so thank you guys. Well, it's interesting because yes, there's like in the list of genius directors, and it's woefully females are woefully underserved. But I mean, you think about Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and various Billy Wilder. I don't know who, but I mean and of course Elia Kazan. And it's difficult because he's an incredible writer. He's no doubt a genius.
Yes.
And yet I grapple with my disappointment and anger with him, and
Right,
so I thought I needed to read the book to get further along in what I was feeling about it. And I'm absolutely think he was horrible for doing what he did.
Well, yeah. You mean the
naming names.
Names.
Yeah. His justifying even just makes me, his digging in his heels afterwards makes me even more, if anything, just disappointed.
But one of the reasons Ash and I wanted to tackle Mike Nichols' life was precisely because Mike refused to do in his lifetime what Kazan did, which was write a memoir, write an autobiography.
Oh, that's a good place to start. That's true.
Even though people beseeched him to do it. I mean, this great life, these amazing stories, and he was adamant about not doing it. In fact, when I forgot who it was donating their archives to a university or something. Mike said, good for you, but I don't have archives. All my stuff will be scattered to the four winds.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he wouldn't cooperate with a biographer. It was kind of an editor at Knopf tried to get him to just do a book on directing, and even that
technique.
Yeah, he wouldn't do that even. So we felt like his reluctance was made us feel like someone had to do it instead. So
because
we took it upon ourselves.
Yeah, he would have had some great collaborators too. I mean, people like John Lahr, Wally Shawn, the playwright, offered to work with him, but he wouldn't buy what they were selling.
Budge.
Yeah.
I mean, you actually do talk. I mean, some of your subjects, because the book that we're discussing, which we should say from the start, is called "Life Isn't Everything." Mike Nichols is remembered by 103.
It's 150 is the final tally.
Oh, right. This is a galley. So 100, right. Mike Nichols is remembered by 150 of his closest friends. So 43 more.
We dug up 47 more bodies
popped up.
to talk to.
Who wouldn't want to go on the record, right? Is there anybody who said no?
Let's see. Yes.
Mentioning their names is another issue.
Yeah. Should we dignify them by...
Well, the one person who turned me down, Ash and I kind of divided the work, I think. One person who I pursued who turned me down was the producer, Scott Rudin. And that's because he felt like he couldn't tell the story of his life or Mike's life all over again, I mean, and he had just been through it. So he turned me down. And Stephen Sondheim didn't exactly turn us down, but it took like a year to get to him.
And at a certain point, you just have to move on, right?
And
yeah.
And
I mean, the thing is with
hold it a little closer.
I mean, we didn't get, despite a lot of trying, we didn't get Elaine May, but that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who knows anything about her. And besides that, the reason we felt Mike would be a good subject for an oral biography is because he lived a big life, like the subjects of other great oral biographies that we've loved, like Truman Capote, for example. He just cut a big swath through the 20th century and worked with and knew so many people that, frankly, we didn't feel like the book was going to live or die whether any one or two people said yes or no. So it was just about getting a kind of a critical mass, which we feel we did at by a certain point.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like she's Elaine. That is there anyway. I mean, she's almost everybody talks about her to the degree where she's,
Yeah.
what is she going to say? I mean, she was maybe too close.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have Diane Sawyer in here either, right?
No.
Yeah, so, it's okay. You don't have Mike Nichols either, by the way. In case
Yeah.
So first let's take a step back, because one is, how do you guys know each other? How did you meet? How did you decide together that you were going to, did you, rather than me ask, you could just tell.
Well, we kind of bonded over Mike Nichols, really.
Right.
I mean, Sam had written a couple of stories with Mike's, about Mike for Vanity Fair. I was a PA, one of several PAs on Mike Nichols' last movie, Charlie Wilson's War, and Sam had just done this. He'd gotten Mike and Elaine to reunite in their first print interview in 50 years, and I was kind of talking to him about it and just saying how great it was, and we just started gassing about how much we loved Mike Nichols, basically. And then when he died, Sam suggested that we call up some of the people he worked with and get a kind of, get them to reminisce a little bit, and that is what grew into the book.
Yeah, I guess you can never have foreseen or predicted that you'd have 150 of those people. You probably thought, let's just start with a handful of his closest allies.
Yeah. I mean, this book began life as a piece, an oral
testimonial
portrait, in remembrance of Mike, not long after his death, in Vanity Fair. And the reaction from Diane and David Geffen and a lot of people was so strong and encouraging that we just decided to.
They liked that original Vanity Fair piece,
yes,
right? You were a contributor to Vanity Fair, a regular contributor.
Yeah.
And so they were so impressed that they gave you their endorsement to do a more robust.
Yes, and we did. Yes,
okay.
And we wanted to get at least Diane Sawyer's blessing, to the extent that we could, and she did in a way. And in terms of her kind of cooperation, she gave us the Deidre Baer blessing, which is Deidre Baer was Samuel Beckett's great biographer. And Beckett said, "I'm not going to help you, but I'm not going to stop you."
Right. Yeah.
And so, and in some cases, she gave other people permission to talk to us.
Yeah.
The article, it was originally assigned at like 6,000 words or something. We turned in 11, and they ran the whole thing, and which is pretty long for a magazine article. And we still didn't. There was so much of his career that it just gave such short shrift to in this piece. Mm-hmm. So it seemed like it was just not only the barest start, and that we really there was so much more on the table to do.
Oh, absolutely, and it's clear by having read this. By the way, I want to mention we did say before that these are oral testimonials. This is not written in a typical narrative structure, but it is chronological, essentially.
More or less.
More or less. It does go through his life from the start. One of your main participants is his brother, so you really have as close to Mike as you're going to get from the beginning of his life, right? Because his brother was he younger? I can't remember.
A couple years younger.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, when they came over from what was Nazi Germany, I believe by themselves on what was then the largest ship or passenger line in the world at the time, the Bremen, I think it was called. Robert Nichols, Mike's brother, was 3, and I believe Mike was about 7. And so people were horrified that these 2 little boys were by themselves leaving Germany for America. But Robert Nichols said he kind of remembered it as sort of a great adventure. They were kind of looked after by people on the ship, but their father sent them away. And I think it was a seminal event, really. I mean, because they escaped the Holocaust just by the skin of their teeth, really.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert Nichols told us, that his mother always thought that their father was a genius, but he said, really? I mean, he left Russia for Nazi Germany. How smart is that? So, but they all did manage to get out.
Yeah, most of the famous Hollywood directors that were immigrants and that we hear about were adults. This was obviously
yes.
a very rare exception.
That's
right.
So
therefore, he's an entire generation younger than those others, like
right.
the Billy Wilders and the Ernst Lubitsch's, etc.
Yes, Lubitsch was not 3 years old or 7 years old when he came to America.
Yes,
and Mike didn't already have a body of work in Germany before leaving. So
exactly.
Well, that's true. That's exactly right. Yes, exactly. Yet there is some things in common with the hunger, and maybe a sense of I don't know, just a belief in themselves or something. I don't know what drives them, that they are such enormous successes. There's so many.
Yeah, and I think Lubitsch is probably more just I think there is a little bit of a Wilder connection because the work that Wilder did in America is just so American. And
yes, right.
And in the same way that Nichols was, but at the same time, I think there is still a European quality to both of them, but they both became great just chroniclers and noticers of American life at a certain moment in the 20th century.
Mm-hmm. And also, you're quite open, or a number of people are quite open, that Mike Nichols, most people don't know this because he took such care to hide it, I guess, was that he had this, it's a disorder, right? He had wasn't a disease,
a condition,
but maybe
really.
A condition is a better way to put it. Do you want to talk about that? Because it's so, in a way, so part of his story,
Absolutely, His brother told us you cannot. I mean, this was in a way the great event of his or catastrophe of his life, which was that probably as a result of a immunological reaction either to a vaccination or they're not sure. He developed this condition, alopecia universalis, I think it was called, but he lost all of his hair.
What age was that?
He was between 3 and 5.
Know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Good enough.
Very young.
Yeah.
I mean, he all through school he wore a cap. His father was adamant for some reason about not getting his son a wig of any kind. So he would wear a ball cap at school and take it off at home.
I think it just made him feel different, and it made him and I think that probably did make him a more. It heightened his antenna for other people's behavior and so forth, just because I think he was such an observer. And that's on top of being, a German immigrant and all the rest. So
yeah. And so between choosing his name, Mike Nichols, and taking care of the hair issue, he wanted to present in a particular way, and boy, did that work out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as Meryl Streep said, in a way, he was a great actor. He was acting at being an American. He was acting at being Mike Nichols. He was acting as someone with hair.
Yeah. Right. By the way, his wigs he would rotate, right? There would be some longer and longer. So it was like, I don't know if anybody else.
He would send them away for haircuts. And
well, I mean, in quotes. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. They didn't grow the hair, right? So.
Yeah, they weren't chia wigs. But
sooner or later, that will be a thing. But who would have known? Unfortunately, for the wig business, baldness on men has become. I thought he tattooed his eyebrows or something. No?
Nope.
Never did.
No,
Okay,
no.
Okay, very good. Interesting. Well, you mentioned Candace Bergen. I call her Candy. We have that kind of relationship. And Meryl. Well, let's talk about some of the. I mean, there's clearly too many. Even when you were back at 103 in the original, the first pass, that's too many to mention. And we mentioned Robert, his brother, who took the same name, Nichols.
Yeah, the father changed the name basically when they were coming over.
He took that care of that on the paperwork. Okay, but every other
it was
life,
an Americanization of another family name, Nikolaevich or something like that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, their original last name was Peshkowski, and Mike's first name was Igor originally.
I don't see
Yeah,
it.
isn't that something?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. As Candice Bergen says, could you imagine having to have gone, through school in New York with the name Igor? So they did him a big favor, I think,
Yes. And with no hair, it would have been, poor guy would have been tortured. There are a lot of similarities in his career to actually Kazan, just in terms of two things. One is the amazing opportunities from the beginning, and being, with the projects that he was trusted with, because, as a kid, a very young man, he had, I guess, in Mike's case, he had proven himself as a stand-up comedian or as a improviser comedian right? Because his first chapter was as a comedian with Elaine, as a partner with Elaine May. And from there, he directed Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which was...
Yeah, before that, obviously, Barefoot in the Park and The Odd Couple on stage.
So he'd already had some stage... Yeah. Okay, very good. So he had already formed some alliance with... but,
that's another thing he shares with Kazan, is that he achieves greatness both as a theater director and a film director, like very, very few others, really.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Elaine, but a lot less prolifically in her case. But he, just an astounding series of enough so to work his way to rather get to the top tier of success in that business before having a few failures. So if you can just get if you have a half a dozen huge successes, you're kind of set unless you do something really just. That was his case.
Just think of the achievement post Elaine, which was, as Ash said, Barefoot in the Park. I think he won a Tony for that as a director.
And the alliances of the actors,
The Odd Couple,
the playwrights,
and then Who's Afraid of Virginia
Even Love,
Woolf?
I think he won a Tony for
as
well.
What's that?
Right.
L-U-V, Love.
Oh, Love,
yeah.
Murray Schiskell.
Right. Yeah. First, and then the first two films, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf,
and then I forget the next one.
Yeah, really. Could you imagine? So at some point, it's in our book where Mike tells someone, I want to get I'd like to get the first failure out of the way. You know what I mean?
And he couldn't do it.
Well, yeah. Well,
it depends
how you feel about Catch-22, which I think is a...
Yes.
Do you like that film?
Oh, yeah, I love it. But,
yeah, so do we.
But I love I love the stories around it, the mythology around it more than anything. I had Austin Pendleton on the show, so we got a first-hand account of Orson Welles trying to beat up Mike Nichols. And Mike Nichols can handle Orson Welles. I think he was going to be okay, even with a flop. So it was a flop maybe because it was too ambitious and maybe... should have been more of a departure from the source material, but when you look back at it now, it's utterly watchable.
That's
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go on.
I think that
it was too dark.
It had some things two things going against it. Really, one is that Mike was just too successful, and people wanted to take him down a peg. And there was some, I think the movie there was some bad industry press about it while it was being made because it was a very ambitious movie. He had the fourth largest Air Force in the world and so forth. A guy died during the making of the movie, one of the stunt pilots. And then they had the bad fortune of coming out a couple, basically around the same time.
Oh, right,
as
MASH, right,
yeah.
which was a huge success.
Right. Yeah, today I don't, there's no reason why you need to compare the two movies, but at the time it was sort of inevitable. But I think Catch-22 is a really brilliant movie. And
I do too. It's experimental. It is. It's as the novel is. So it's really dark and experimental. And not that the audiences weren't okay with that, but if you compare it to MASH, no matter how dark MASH is with all the blood and everything else, it is a conventional movie with a conventional humor in it. Whereas not Catch-22. It's extremely. It's all ironic. It's all abstract, and it's very dark. from the beginning.
A very beautiful movie. Giuseppe Rotunno, Fellini's this DP shot it. I think the cast is just unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. One of the most incredible casts ever assembled.
I think so. Yeah.
I know.
Every character actor working seemed to be in that movie of that day. from Bob Balaban to Austin, as I mentioned. To
Bob
Orson.
Newhart is
Bob
wonderful.
Newhart.
Yeah, he's great.
You know,
Fantastic.
I mean,
Yeah.
who knew?
Who's in the
Yeah.
book, by the way, we should mention.
Yeah.
Yes, he's very
I
good
mean,
in the book.
Yeah, so a few people like, Tony Perkins, unfortunately, weren't around.
Yeah.
But
or Orson Welles. Wonder if he would have been available if he had been alive.
Yeah.
If he would have made himself available. But
Yes.
what's that?
Yeah.
But you got Robert Redford, because we already mentioned Barefoot in the Park. You have Dustin Hoffman and Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel, although not in the same room, I'm going to guess.
Yeah.
Because they either credited him or blamed him, depending which you're speaking to.
Right.
That Mike Nichols was essentially responsible for the end of their
breaking up Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah.
And I understand it because Garfunkel had acted in Carnal Knowledge, and then kind of Paul Simon was off in Europe, and then came back with all new songs to record and everything. Only Garfunkel didn't tell him that he was being cast in Catch-22, and Paul Simon was supposed to be.
Well, I mean, it's
As
a little
well.
bit of a... But he basically didn't tell him that he had gotten the Carnal Knowledge part. The Catch-22 thing was...
Was that before?
It was before.
Oh, I got it mixed up.
Yeah, basically Mike offered them both parts, and Catch-22 said, "Oh, the script's getting too long. We're going to cut... Paul, we have to cut your part out, so... I guess we'll have to take Artie's part out, too." And he said, "No, it's okay. Leave it in." But then... Garfunkel didn't tell him about the Carnal Knowledge thing.
Yeah, and when Paul Simon asked him, why didn't you do that? Why did you keep it a secret from me? He said, "Well, I thought if I told you, you wouldn't finish Bridge Over Troubled Water with me."
God,
I just love those kind of those seminal moments, like that. They're just two people kind of carping at each other, but it's about this kind of famous great work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much longer that duo would have lasted with
he
or
said
without
that
Mike
to us,
Nichols.
I think.
Yeah. Given
they were kind of arguing
egos.
all the time anyway, and
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, if I may say, in Artie's defense, I think the guy's a pretty good actor.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
Yeah.
well, between those two films, it's inarguable, and very watchable. I don't know how much Mike Nichols worked with him, but even if he wasn't as, let's say, terrific actor as Richard Burton, for instance, or someone, he may not have that gravitas, but Mike Nichols knew how to work with actors, and with people.
Yeah, I mean, Artie, he just had Burton, I imagine Burton was, I've heard, and I can imagine that this is the case, is better on stage, because he's just such a kind of capital A actor, whereas Artie, he just had a more naturalistic kind of quality. Exactly, he was just kind of a regular guy on screen, and he really was believable and had a certain sort of nebbishy charm as that guy.
But you can track through Elia's films and then Mike Nichols' films, which sort of overlap, but they also run long or they kind of span, I should say. Mm-hmm. Over a period of time from old Hollywood, where is a very theatrical approach for many years, right? Where people, copied the kind of style from the stage, and they, spoke very, very eloquently, and didn't talk over each other. To, let's say, Kazan, who totally disrupted that,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have Nichols, who went even more naturalistic, but maybe less political. That's arguable too. So I shouldn't make such generalizations about that.
Yeah, he did direct Primary Colors. I mean,
much later, but I mean, I think,
and Charlie Whistle's War.
Yeah. But I mean, I think something like Catch-22 is political in its way, or what have you.
Sure.
But in terms of the acting thing, it just reminds me of something I heard Alec Baldwin say once, that first you had classical training, then came method, and now we have fitness. So that's the
Say that again.
It went from the kind of Shakespearean approach to the...
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about the superhero movies?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. I see. Again, the name of the book is called Life Isn't Everything, subtitled Mike Nichols, as remembered by 200 by now, probably?
100, yeah. Maybe.
I know, but we've been here for like a half hour.
150
of his closest
friends.
By Ash Carter and Sam Kashner. And it's being published by the best publisher in New York City, Henry Holt.
Yeah.
And people can purchase their book. It's coming out in November?
November 12th.
So they can pre-order the book. Can they pre-order
in bulk
now?
I hope.
Currently, even? Okay. We'll figure out what's the best day to put this show up. But they should be at least able to pre-order the book.
Mm.
So if not already, just get it right away. It'll be if this is an interesting question. You can't do an audio version, or can you?
Well, I suggested they hire Rich Little, the impressionist, to do 150 different voices.
Okay, but I'm not sure how his Candice Bergen is.
No, well,
another
Elaine Boozler and Rich Little.
Okay.
I don't know.
Maybe somebody under 80.
Yeah, there will be an audiobook, and we've got two great kind of a man and a woman actor. Who are,
that makes sense.
Yeah,
the actors will know how to do it very well.
Tell me, Adam, do you have a favorite Mike Nichols movie? Actually,
thank you for asking. I'm not prepared. It's almost impossible to come up with one because there are so many great ones. But I guess I would have to say, if I was on an island and I had to choose just one Mike Nichols, I would probably choose The Graduate.
Yeah,
because every time I watch it, and I probably do every couple of years, I just never get tired of it, and I just always enjoy it on a new level. There's a handful of movies like that.
Yeah,
and it's one of them.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think I share your sentiment. Also, Ash very cleverly picked out. I guess was it Tom Hanks who said it? Yeah, Ash chose it as the title for the chapter in which we have everyone speaking about The Graduate. Tom Hanks called it the Citizen Kane of disaffected youth.
Absolutely.
Yeah, kind of.
But it's funny what you're saying, that you can keep revisiting it over and over and enjoying it, and getting different things out of it. I think that at the time, I think it was the highest grossing movie of the year, or second highest, or something like that, which is so unimaginable today when like the top 5 are all Marvel Comics movies. But it was a youth movie basically, and there was young people going to see it multiple times, which is what kind of drove its box office, and it was seen as just this real kind of generational statement. But I think that unlike a lot of other youth movies at the time, you can keep watching it as you get older, and your perspective on the events in the movie starts to change. It's it's not a typical youth movie in that way. I think it's much more it's more layered than that, and more ambivalent. It's not. So I feel the same way about the movie then as you.
And the way it kind of did so many things first. The way it kind of reinvented what a leading man was and looked like, and
right.
Made me popular in school, and the use of the Simon and Garfunkel score,
absolutely,
the music.
Yes, you always hear so much about that in the story about how he already had Paul Simon already had a sense of the song that he was going to contribute, because I think he had already but it was called Mrs. Roosevelt at the time.
Yeah, right,
exactly. He adjusted it for.
Yes.
Okay, so you're both we're all three on essentially choosing the same film as our favorite Mike Nichols. Is that?
I think so. I do think Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is arguably one of the great adaptations of a theater work for the movies.
Yeah.
It's just kind of hard to watch because it's so intense and difficult, and
yes.
but it's amazing. Yeah, it's a great work. Elizabeth Taylor was never better.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
And
Richard Burton in the movies. Yeah.
And I know we talked about Catch-22 already, because I think that's really up there. But Carnal Knowledge, I think, is very, very high on my list as well.
Yeah.
Silkwood in its way, and the thing is, I do think it's kind of the 60s and early 70s is definitely, I think those are his strongest years. But I think that it's something like Angels in America is pretty close to
one. I was
yeah.
going to say I just rewatched it because of the book. I realized when I saw it originally on HBO,
mm-hmm.
I was really blown away. I don't think I saw the Broadway play, so I was really looking forward to it, and I felt it was just transcendent,
yes.
a work. And so I went back and I watched it again, and it works about 80% as well as it did the first time I saw it. It doesn't have the advantage of being my first time seeing it, or maybe it's inspired a lot of other work, So it's just it's almost impossible to have the same experience, of course, but it is one of his best in terms of screen works.
Well, also significant too. I mean, it's a great work, but as Ash says, Mike and Angels in America made television safe for A-list actors.
Oh, interesting.
Really, when you think about it, you couldn't have gotten
Pacino,
Nicole Kidman near television before, or
but Meryl, he brought Meryl Streep and Al Pacino.
Before,
it doesn't
absolutely.
get bigger than that. And I mean, as Richard Plepler said, that even David Chase and David Simon weren't David Chase and David Simon when they came to HBO, meaning that they weren't. It was the work they did at HBO is what made them big names.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Steven Spielberg had made Band of Brothers around the same time as Angels in America, but it wasn't. The cast was not what the Angels cast was. So in terms of the actors, I think that certainly the HBO executives we talked to, credited that as a real turning point for HBO, and I think for cable TV or whatever you call it these days, that really changed things for now what we take for granted, that it's like every great actor wants to do something on television.
Emma
I
Thompson,
think he could have
also.
Oh, sure, right.
Yeah.
She at that time she was just, but I will argue that I would argue that you could have taken an entire cast of unknown actors in that particular production. He would have made it a huge success regardless.
True.
It's that powerful a piece,
Mm-hmm.
And he was the right director for it, and it's just it's an amazing work.
Well, I mean, it's so
because some of the other actors.
Yeah, I mean, like
Ben
Schenkman
and
Justin Kirk,
right,
and Patrick Wilson,
right,
were
all of which
relative
have become big actors known for their movies and their TV as well as theater. Yeah,
and I mean, they actually did read. They had some sort of bigger actors read for those parts, but if they didn't have theater backgrounds, and so they kind of couldn't do it basically, and so he wound up going with lesser known actors for those parts, and I think they all are outstanding. They're so.
Mike Nichols liked working with big stars, though. We could say that.
Yes, you can say that.
Yeah, he did.
But he was great with any actor if they.
I
discovered a lot of people.
I think that it partly there was a strategic element to that, where something like Angels, for example, or something like Hurly Burly, which is, when they first did it in Chicago, it was practically 5 hours long and a very, very kind of difficult play in certain ways. He used actors as a way to get people to give this material a chance.
Yeah, the difficult subject matter and the length of it, nobody's going to go to it. It's very true. Well, not many.
Not fewer.
A lot of people,
let's say.
Many fewer. So that's a very good point. And I saw it probably because of that. And, what a cast. It was incredible. But only he could do that, I think. Maybe very few people could possibly put together a cast the way he could. Get so many people to come aboard just because of who he is.
That was something.
Spielberg is another one probably, but I don't know that. But he's not interested in those types of stories.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that was one thing that struck me when working on this book was, I thought, well, where were the aluminum siding salesman that Mike knew, or the the guy who runs the pro shop and the golf, the country club. I mean, there were no, I would say ordinary people, but it was, he just knew so many people, and they were just of such a kind of high artistic, of high seriousness and high artistic caliber, that it was, we did have a hard time just, finding anyone who wasn't famous or incredibly accomplised, Yeah.
Plus, you have to sell the book too. So
that's true.
You're in the same position as Mike when it comes to the 5 hour.
That's true. We took a page out of his book, I guess.
Yeah.
But
and then put it back in.
It was odd. I mean,
Although I mean, his longtime assistant director, this guy Mike Haley, who I knew from Charlie Wilson's War, he said to it, he was a total just blue collar guy and had no idea why Mike wanted to keep him around, and yet they had this kind of connection that lasted decades. And he said, when Mike died, it affected him even. He said, he's the only man, possibly even more than my father, whom I could say I loved. And this is not a famous man,
Yeah. Well, that's nice.
I ask you, most of these were done through email, through phone, in person, all the above?
Have a mix. Really.
Yeah, a mix.
Because since it's obviously this would be one that would lend itself to, let's say an email through a publicist, for instance, Woody Allen.
No, we didn't. There's. I'm not going to say there's one or two of those, but for the most part, I would say maybe 50% phone, 50% in person, something like that.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, the graduate chapter, for example,
Bob.
I went through a lot of delicatessens, and sat through a lot of bad lunches, mostly in LA. Yeah, for that.
Sam went to visit Robert Nichols in San Diego. I think that's where he lives.
In California.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of phone calls.
Very good.
Yeah. And on the, and people like Jude Law or Tom Stoppard. Edward St. Aubin, the novelist who loved Mike. They were abroad, and we spent a lot of time with them, but over the telephone,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems to me like that would be illegitimate. This book, especially because of the structure of it and how you go. And there's some other, although I didn't get the photos in my copy because of
the photos are great.
They are. And the book again comes out in November. What is there a date? 12. November 12th. Mary, do you have a favorite Mike Nichols film? Can I put you on the spot?
Well, it's funny because I have my assistant who you all met who's in her 20s. And when we went through the whole filmography, I kept saying, well, you have to see this movie. And you have to see that one. And you've got to watch The Graduate. And we just went on and on and on. And so it's really hard to pick a favorite.
Okay, so you're cheating. You're not going to give me an answer. You're
I'm going to say Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and The Graduate.
Correct answer, Emma. We have a consensus. Well, yes, thank you guys. Do we basically hit it to the marks here? Did we leave anything out? Did we?
No, I did you enjoy the book, Adam?
No.
No, that's a shame. We tried so hard to please you, but
my favorite guests seem always to be authors and journalists. I don't know. It's just I bring on Josh or whomever. It gives me the opportunity to read, learn about, to become more knowledgeable about a particular subject matter. And I will say this, I met Mike Nichols twice.
Yeah.
Oh, yes?
Yeah. So the first time was Stanley Donen and him were doing a talk and at Lincoln Center with Walter Reed. So, he sat right up front. And I was in heaven and enjoying that. And then afterwards, they were just kind of people standing around talking, and they both came off the stage, and I got to say hello to Stanley Donen, and then Elaine May was there.
Yeah.
So they were talking so surreptitiously. I took some pictures with my phone. This is probably about 6 years ago, 6 or 7, and they were talking, and they were and I couldn't believe that it was a reunion. She of course was Stanley Donen's partner, so it made sense that she would be there for a number of reasons. And then I went outside and onto the mezzanine, that landing outside of the Walter Reed, and I was standing there, and Mike Nichols came out alone, and I just was like I did with Arthur Miller once, but I just went up to him and I just said, "That's great," and thank you, and he was so warm and it's so nice. I said, "Listen, I hate to do this, but could we do a photo?" So he humored me with a very nice photo. So I have a photo of me.
You took a selfie with Mike Nichols?
I don't think it was it might have been a selfie, but no, I think somebody was just walking by and I said, "Can you take this?" And so we had that. And then not long after that, within a year or two, I was down at the restaurant at the Eleanor Bunnan Monroe. That they have that restaurant right on 65th Street or whatever. And I was with a friend of mine, a filmmaker, and Mike was sitting right next to us, like right there. How do I do this? Well, he was chatty and warm and gracious, and I introduced him to Martha, and she's pretty and warm, so he enjoyed meeting her. And then I was like, so anyway, I do a podcast. He wasn't having it, I don't think. But he just smiled, But I got to talk to him again. That was price of admission. So yeah.
Well, Stanley Donen had a necklace.
Yes.
Yes. About his
I don't know where
necklace.
it came from. I just remember I think he was wearing that.
Yeah. Well, it had a little medallion on it, and it said, if I'm lost, please return me to Elaine May.
I didn't know.
But yeah, that was kind of.
We might have to go to the videotape. That one. Yeah. Thank you guys. Ash, feel better. Thank you for coming despite your cold. You're a new dad, and so I appreciate your making the trip.
Really
thanks for having
us.
Sam. Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. We'll do it again, with your next work or anytime you want to come on and talk about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our oral biography of Five-ish Finkel should be out in 10 years.
Love the Yiddish theater.
Okay.
How can people follow you? I rarely remember to ask this, but since you're journalists, I think it's a great question. Are you on the Twitter?
I'm supposed to. I am, but it's but hardly.
It's easy to Google Sam Kashner and find him, and he's a contributor to Vanity Fair. Any other?
Well, now an editor at large at Airmail.
New digital weekly.
Oh, very good.
The digital weekly, edited by Graydon Carter and Alessandra Stanley.
Oh, very good. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And Ash, you.
Yeah, I'm working there, and
so you're working together.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Okay. And
we're never apart.
All right. Good enough. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.